afternoon, and welcome to Workforce Observer, the podcast where we go beyond the headlines to uncover the real forces reshaping work, talent, technology, and the business of staffing. Today, I'm joined by Ranjith Menon, Global HR Executive and Senior Vice President of Corporate Human Resources at Hinduja Global Solutions. Ranjit's career spans more than 2 decades and continents, leading HR transformation, M&A integration, and global workforce strategies across industries. In this episode, we'll talk about many things, including the evolution of HR as a strategic partner and how organizations can adapt to rapid change while keeping the human experience at the center. Welcome, Ranjit. Very happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I know that you've lived and led teams across continents from India to Europe to the US. How has that exposure shaped your view of workforce trends and the evolution of talent models worldwide?
Well, first of all, I think I consider myself lucky to have had the exposure to go and live in all these places and work in pretty large organizations, global organizations over the last 20, 25 years. I think one of the core lessons over the last two and a half decades, what I have seen when I first moved out of India, it was 2004, 2005. And over the last 20 years, what I have seen is the global talent model, what we know as it is today,
Yeah, yeah.
it is decentralizing and it is clearly shifting from a one size fits all to a globally consistent but at the same time locally adaptive operating model. So, the most effective talent model in my view is a
Yeah.
geocentric HR model where global standards of ethics, technology and career paths, but the authority for managing performance or rewards, compliance, it's all very local. So
I
in
see.
my own words, as we call it, 80% standard and 20% available for customizing according to the nuances of the lay of the land that we operate in. To me, that makes it more, evolving and because there is over, especially after COVID, there is a big shift from jobs to skills. And so if you look at now, if you keep this particular paradigm and just try to, match this, in US, it's a very market-driven model. Europe, it is more institutional. It's the social model, as we would call it. And in places like India or China, it's more the scale and the aspiration model. So what I mean by that is, the move from skill-based hiring, it is driven acutely by, talent shortage or rapid technology change, especially AI and other things in this market in North America, for example. Whereas if you look at Europe, the shift is often managed through a lens of what I call as a social partnership, worker protection, and in many
True.
ways, regulated upskilling. Again, that's a very
That's a,
nuanced when you look at
yeah,
it,
that's a
from that
good
point of
way
view.
of putting it,
This,
regulated upskilling. Yeah.
yeah, and then in if you go to India or China or any of those developing nations, it's the sheer scale and availability of the young, educated workforce that provides a need for global competitiveness. So that's the main shift. That's the key driver when you look at those emerging markets. So, or the other words, if you look at, let's say, work flexibility and hybrid model, which is again a trend that we see today.
Right.
Europe, for lack of better connotation, I would say there is I call it the right to disconnect model.
I kind of like it
The
actually.
flexibility, the flexibility is heavily influenced by strong labor laws, collective agreements, and a deep ingrained culture of work-life balance. That is exactly the opposite when you go to a place like probably India, or if you look at US, for
The
example, it's
US,
it's
yeah.
more it's more individual autonomy model. Flexibility is framed as an employee perk or a tool for attracting top talent in a competitive market.
Yeah, okay, all
This
right.
is this is
Thank you.
very different from as I used to say, every child born in India, if they have to get into an Ivy League business school or a technical school, they have to outplace at least somewhere close to, depending on the premium nature of that particular school, they probably replace 100,000 people to get into that school. That's the
Yeah,
sheer
fair.
level of competitiveness that you see. So many of these, models which work beautifully according to the culture of these various continents is
Yeah.
very different when we go to another continent. So
Fair
yeah, so
enough.
these are some of the things, so this is why I say a geocentric model, because what works in talent acquisition in India is probably an overkill in some of the other geographies, or
Sure.
what works
What works
in
in A, B does not work. So basically, what you're saying is managing people is local. How you
Yeah,
manage is local culture.
managing people, it definitely has to be local, because otherwise, there is simply no way for us to get into that mode of, properly, addressing this.
Okay, thank you. Uh, what about, you've overseen large-scale transformation and M&A programs. I guess what insights can staffing and workforce leaders take from your experience in aligning people's strategy with, change, with, rapid business change?
Yeah, I mean, so I have been fortunate enough to handle some very key M&As in some of my past organizations, to the tune of close to 1.5 billion in the price of the deals. I think one of the things that has really helped us, and again, in my view, no M&A is similar. Everyone has a unique challenge, a unique advantage, and while we go through many of those deals over the years, what I have found is, I think that's an area where HR leadership moves from being a function to being a critical business accelerator. HR as a function, I have seen in almost all the deals that has successfully happened over my career, HR was a key driver in making that deal happen. And change management, it's literally change management on a compressed timeline. There is, once the deal is okayed and it moves on to the next stage of integration, that is where the key. So my core insight is that our mindset as HR professionals should be moving from supporting the transformation or the transaction to structuring the desired future in the combined organization, depending on how the deal structure is. So when you look at I think what has worked in some of the cases, I mean, we can always talk about, is there a culture shift and so all the soft elements that come as a part of it. But more than that, by combining these two organizations, what are you going to do in future? How is the combined workforce getting ready to address the future demands of the combined organization? Are we looking at a proactive cultural integration and proper risk management in that process? Are we trying to retain, is our talent structure is something which is designed for meeting the skills of this future? Is the key. So obviously there will be 3 to 5 or 6 non-negotiable cultural elements which we need for the desired future stage. But beyond, for example, let's say speed against consensus, or customer obsessed collaboration, or the human element beyond most of the things. If we embed these elements into the operating model, performance metrics and other things from day one, that is when you can see the success of M&A flowing through. And I think all around us we can see wonderful examples of how two companies or two organizations or two business units from various companies coming together and creating wonder as a combined organization. To me, therefore, the mindset should be moving from how do we become critical business accelerators rather than key catalysts for the transaction alone. The real work
Okay.
for HR starts at the time of identifying a potential M&A target, where you first assess the culture fit, the business fit, and all of that, and then walking through that entire transaction, and then finally bringing it to a steady state, probably few months or quarters down the line.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go to this because I think it's the heart of a lot of things. Technology, it's reshaping the system, right? How do you say AI, automation, redefining HR operations? Workforce planning. I I know it's a huge question, but since we don't have so much time, what would you say?
So gone are those days where we used to spend. I remember 25 years ago, there used to be at least a half a day program on employee onboarding, wherein you come in, you start filling up forms,
I
you
remember that.
sit through various mandatory trainings. So
Yeah,
effectively, the first week of the employee is spent in assimilating himself or herself into the organization,
yeah,
and that luxury we don't have anymore. Especially,
right.
I think COVID again, going back, has taught us a lot of things, which forced us to rethink the old way of doing things. That is on the HR operations aspect. If you take it slightly towards the back end, with the advent of ERP systems like SAP or some of the others that we have learned to somehow integrate a lot of processes in back end, and now that still requires a fair amount of human intervention. We still don't have a perfect system, to best of my knowledge, in any of the organizations where if a candidate accepts a job, are there automatic triggers automatically going without any human intervention
Ah,
for the procurement of the systems, for making sure the induction team is informed, for making sure the facility team is informed. If the person requires an office, is that getting set up? Because you will have a person joining in 2 weeks or maybe 2 months, depending on the notice period. The
right.
entire machinery has to work in a complete harmony, like a perfect symphony, to make sure that this happens. Today, we have certain level of automation happening within that, wherein
Right.
the AI with the remote robotic process automation can clearly help us move forward. An automatic email can be created, automatic calendar invites can be sent, an automatic advance induction can be scheduled. Inductions need not be even person centric, it can be bite sized for the person, to not to sit through a 3 hour PowerPoint presentation, but more in terms of bite sized on a daily basis, self paced, and many of these things can even happen much before the employee actually gets onboarded.
Compress
So
everything and make it smarter. Hmm.
it
Okay.
can definitely work. I think some organizations, including ours, we have made some bit of progress in this area. And yeah, I mean, I think so. From an AI perspective, again, the way we use, I think many people confuse automation with AI many times. Can AI do this for, when somebody tells you, can AI do this for me, they are essentially asking, can this AI do this particular process as we do it today in an automated fashion? I think we have to think much beyond that. How do you transform an experience or transform a process by using automation or artificial intelligence? That will essentially require you to completely rethink the existing process itself. There might be things within that process which probably is not relevant anymore. So yeah,
I
I mean,
guess,
we can. It's a very big topic, but
yeah, yeah.
we can definitely.
Yeah. No, sure, sure. But just in terms of workforce planning and the skills companies value, what are you seeing? I know I have to ask you, we have to be brief because we have to get through, I want to move it on. It's valuable for the audience to hear what you have to say. So, what are you seeing? Like,
So when so when workforce is becoming so okay, so some of the things, I think one of the key strategy from a HR standpoint, especially for some of the organizations where staffing and other areas are involved. I think the action that they need to look at is work on, let's say, a proactive pipeline building of candidates. When stop, we should essentially look at stop to react towards the requisitions that are coming and start building and maintaining a warm global talent pool in for critical roles, anticipating how they could come up in the organization. That's the real value that staffing can have. They will not be able to do this unless the skills in the organization and the validation of the skills are clearly mapped. This will give you a much more proactive approach to it. More in terms of also providing workforce agility. I mean, how do you bring in a flexible blend of full-time and contingent workers for rapid scaling? And how do you increase that? So again, that brings you to the topic of contingent workforce expertise. Offering
yeah,
managed
yeah.
solutions for the gig economy. Again,
Sure.
where to use the gig economy, where to use talent from outside, where to develop talent from inside the organization.
Do you use an MSP by any chance? Does Hinduja Global Solutions use an MSP, managed service provider, for your needs, or no? You don't.
We have in various aspects of our business, not completely, end to end, but it's a combination of what we do.
Okay. No, thank you. That's actually
Yeah.
pretty helpful. I know you coach senior executives, right? So, what leadership traits do you think today are the most critical for those guiding organizations through, I guess, this whole workforce change and reinvention?
I think I think most critical traits for organizations in this area would be through how do you guide the organization through disruption and workforce reinvention. That would be one of the key thing. And how do you blend that towards a forward-looking strategic mindset with a lot of empathy and human-centered skills in the organization. And so in my experience of dealing with this, I think there are few particular areas that stand out. Number one, in my view, would be a strategic vision and adaptability. So what I mean by that is, leaders must not only react but anticipate the next wave of disruption, whether it is technological, whether it is economical or social. So
Okay.
this particularly involves creating what if scenarios, that kind of what if scenario planning, continuous environmental scanning, and then positioning the organization for the future. Again, in terms of adaptability or agility, a rigid leader will fail in a volatile world. A flexible leader, on the other hand, or an agile leader, will learn from those inevitable failures and then pivot strategies to move quickly to success. So that's
Okay.
definitely one thing. And so at some point of time, I think one very key struggle that most of the executives have is in terms of decisiveness. In very high uncertainty, in times of very high uncertainty, indecision can sometimes be very paralyzing. So what I mean by that is that they need to make informed decisions quickly with incomplete information, sometimes even go with gut feel, providing stability and maintaining the momentum for the team. Because even when there is a disruption and if the team is sitting without a lot of direction, that itself can be very detrimental for the long-term success of that team. And
Okay.
needless to say, amongst all these disruptions and chaos, the emotional intelligence, the empathy, the ability to communicate clearly, build trust within the team members. These are some of the things which I think which are most critical. And I think we saw a lot of these during a big pandemic crisis in many of
Yep.
the organizations. There are people who have actually grown up. I personally have seen a lot of leaders coming into limelight during the pandemic and standing in front and leading the organization through the chaos that we all experienced.
Thank you. In sectors like IT, for instance, right? What does a resilient global talent strategy look like? And I think that's part A. And I know these are big questions, but how can staffing firms better align with corporate HR?
So, all of us during our career work with various kind of, external organizations that help us with the staffing needs. Some of the things that I have seen work very beautifully is the constant touch that they keep with us, not necessarily always from a transaction point of view, but are they able to join hand in hand with us in driving our strategy? Not most of the corporate HR teams probably will not have answers as the strategy gets developed. And most of the times the success, let's take a practical example. Let's say we are looking for a CXO level talent.
Right.
Probably not now, probably a year or year and a half, or maybe 2 years from now, as a part of formal succession planning. For the staffing firms that are engaged in this, I think most of the time what I have seen is, they pretty much work hand in hand with the corporate HR or the head of CHROs of the organization, become a part of that organization, understand that culture very well, and then go out as ambassadors of organization when they scout for talent to fill those positions in couple of years time. So because we are really not talking about a vacancy that needs to be filled, we are talking about a proper structured succession planning exercise which takes a considerable amount of time, and it's a mutual process. So what I have seen working is, the action, like I earlier just said, proactive
Right.
pipeline building. That is definitely something. So one of the key things that would be really helpful for the corporate HR teams in all these organizations would be how much does the staffing firm know the current state of affairs of the business and the future directions that we are going to go in. The more they are aligned to that in the organization, with the organization, they will be able to, provide much better, relevant, inputs, be it in terms of, and all that we discussed earlier also goes hand in hand with it. If you're talking about contingent workforce, or if you're talking about, it's basically build versus buy as a decision most of the time when it comes to talent. And the time that we are allowed to have to reach that threshold pretty much sometimes define build versus buy.
The thing with it's hybrid work, remote, 3 days in the office. All the talent today has evolving expectations, right? What are some approaches you've seen that actually help with retention and engagement, especially across global teams? Anything that stands out, to you that you've done, that you maybe have done or you have seen?
So we were pretty. I wouldn't say that our life was disrupted. Our life was not disrupted with COVID. I think all of us, experienced that. But for us specifically, for the Hinduja Global Solutions organization, we had a remote workforce of close to 400 people in Canada since last many years. So we were able to draw from a lot of experiences of how to manage a remote workforce from their experience. I think some of the things that work for us and for most of us, many other organizations would be, probably a lot of practices that we put in place, which kind of elevated that gap that you would have seen when you're physically working together. When you always, whether you are inside office, whether you are working remotely, if you make a remote first meeting protocol, then that elevates the even if somebody is in office, everybody joins through Zoom or Teams or any of the tools that we are using. So that way, we are not depriving the people who are joining remotely from any benefit in terms of, and we would see this normally if everybody is sitting in a conference room versus five people on a Zoom call in the same conference room. I have seen that the people in the conference room get much better attention and interaction as compared to those five people on the
Yes,
Zoom which you see on the screen next
yes,
to you.
very
So
true,
that's
very
one
true.
thing. And something which I strongly advocate is clear standards for asynchronous communication. I think in a recent interaction I was mentioning, if it is something that that you're sending somebody to the other side of the planet, give them time to respond. There has to be acceptance. So what really helps us is, as organizations, we need to implement clear guidelines when to use synchronous communication. If it is really urgent, pick up the phone and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Do
True.
not send an email and then wait after three hours again send an email. These things really happen. So I think, when do you need to have real time meetings versus what are all the things in the organization that can wait for an asynchronous
Yeah,
response
yeah. Be
whenever the
smart
other
and
side of
work
the
it out. Yeah, that's really good.
Exactly. And then maybe, things like, even rotating meeting times. Today you are doing it in central time zone, tomorrow, probably next month, next time you do it in a different time zone.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
always impossible to get somebody from Australia, US, and Europe on the same time zone. So yeah, maybe rotating meeting times. I think from a best practice point of view, some things which I think all of us realize we have missed is dedicated connection time. The old, water cooler moments are no more there, or
True,
coffee machine chats.
true.
So we have to dedicate time to connect with our co-workers, our peers, our team members. We have to budget time for it because everybody is, working and they're struggling to, meet all the deadlines. So we need to find time for those, dedicated connections. I call it dedicated connection time, virtual coffee chat or donut time, whatever you want to call it. And we just have to spend some time to kind of make up for those informal chats that we used to have in office.
I love that donut time. Uh, I'm going to ask anything. I mean, you've been in HR, managing people, managing functions, in different companies. Anything that stands out or is just surprising to you?
I think every organization that I have worked for has given me a unique perspective of culture and how that culture defines that organization. I have been fortunate enough to work in American MNCs, European MNCs, and Indian MNCs. Every one of them that I have worked in has had a unique culture, and I think the success of any new person coming into any organization, irrespective of which part or which type, is the ability to understand quickly the rules of the game inside the organization and how well you can adjust to that. And as a candidate, as a potential candidate, in my view, while you understand the job that you're applying for or the job that you were called in for, what you need to really spend time is to understand the culture of the organization. Because till you are a seasoned employee, it is pretty much walking into, an unknown territory,
It is
both for
unknown.
the organization as well as for the candidate.
Yeah, sure.
And there are various organizations who make that process extremely easy to accommodate and assimilate in the organization. A lot of it is defined by the openness and the culture that an organization believes in. And if it's a startup culture, again, irrespective of which part of the planet, it's very different from an established multinational, behemoth, kind of an organization which has thousands of employees. So yeah, so I think the key element I would say is the culture element, which I have found it very fascinating because that's the key learning also you take away. And over a period of time, as professionals, we experience more cultures. I would say we become more adept in terms of managing or navigating through those cultures. End of the day, whichever way you're looking at it, it's people to people interaction that makes or breaks a business.
Well, thank you for that. Any one last piece of advice for our audience? You can give them to our the staffing leaders, people.
There are a lot of people that reach out asking for advice in terms, especially young talents in HR, who look at and say, "Hey, what worked for you?" I think what has worked for me and hopefully will work for many others is an open mind and always a never-ending curiosity to learn. And as I mentioned in one of my recent interactions, you're hunting for a prize, and there is a price that you have to pay to get that prize. So it is always the price for the price.
Ah,
When we get into pursuing a goal or a dream as a fresh college graduate entering the corporate world or a seasoned professional eyeing for a different role, a higher one, a bigger one, we have to always realize there is a price that we have to pay for it. That could be in terms of your efforts, your time away from family. A lot of things will come into play. Maybe a relocation to some other place. As long as we are comfortable paying the price for the price that we are seeking, I think we will pretty much know where to go and how to build it. And like I said, be open and be curious. Always be open to learning.
well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, Ranjit. That was fascinating.
Thank you so much. I also, enjoyed this conversation quite a bit.